All right, we rolling? Yeah, this is Freedom Phil. Like, subscribe. What's the topic today? I gotta be real about this, and this conversation probably will offend some people, but I'm just giving you the hard truth of what I see in the situation. There's a difference between some of the van lifers and what I just call bums in vans, or bums in RVs, Cousin Eddie mobiles. And there's this program, started about a year ago or so, that basically instead of getting vouchers for Section 8 housing, approved housing, some states are just giving cash. Now, this sounds very similar to what I've seen with people faking crazy, and I gotta wonder how many people are kind of running a multi-scam. Because I see tons of people that, you look at it and you're like, you guys are doing way too well for somebody who's got nothing fucking going on. Yeah. I just want to talk about this and the differences between these two and how these scams basically are causing some of the problems. Yeah, Freedom Phil, like, subscribe, let's get into it, and hey, turn up the video speed. Why do I always say that? Because obviously watch videos faster. You should watch this when I upload it at 1.75. And just to be real about it, then that's why the channel's named it. Turn up the video speed. Like, subscribe, let's get into this. So I'm watching this video and they're talking about vouchers being replaced by cash giveaways. Well, let's just say that you got $1,000 from the government and you just got to figure it out, man. That's the government's answer. Here's $1,000. Figure it out. You don't think there's going to be a lot of people who just aren't trying at all that are going to exploit that system? I got buddies back on the West Coast when faking crazy started becoming semi-normal. And let me give you a little history lesson on the faking crazy scam. Basically, back in the day, we had insane asylums, and one day some people started saying it's cruel, it's unconstitutional, and it's expensive. So it was like the late 70s, early 80s, something like that. They basically just said, well, it's unconstitutional to keep them here, and plus it's costing us a fortune. So they just opened up the doors, and they let the crazies out. Well, here's what happened. A lot of those people couldn't function in society. Some of them had friends and family, but a lot of them that didn't, they just ended up on the streets being bums. And when someone who has a mental issue kind of loses their mind a little bit in a grocery store or something else, they get arrested. And if they're committing minor crimes because they're homeless and hungry, then they end up in jail. And in jail, the situation is even worse, and it costs even more than it kept to keep them in an asylum. So the system that some of these states came up with for people that frankly were unfunctional was, what if we just gave them like a sliver apartment or just a cash amount? Like they would say, well, I'm living in a trailer, or I'm living with my family. I have one buddy that literally what he says is, I live with my sister. And he doesn't live with his sister. He lives next to his dad's diesel shop. Now, probably not now. I don't know if his dad's even in business anymore. But back then, living next to his dad's diesel shop, which was convenient for both parties, because there were people that occasionally would have drug addicts that would try to steal like coat ornaments or car stereos out of vehicles. So having a guy there, that's just literally how he got away with being there, because otherwise they said, you can't live here. This isn't residential property. And he says, I'm the night watchman. They're like, good answer. And so he would get a check for approximately $1,000 a month, maybe 900, and then basically some food stamps, 200 in food stamps, and some crappy government health care. That guy checked out of the system then and there. And it wasn't just him. The one guy, the crown jewel, the guy that took acid and thought he was God, free apartment, money and food. He never had to do shit. And there was the other guy who played the bucket drum. There's a couple other guys I know that did it. I know they were on the system. It's how you still getting by, living just fine, never working a job, and you always got money to party, not like party hard, but just party enough. And the answers were simple. So then you start to think to yourself, bringing this back to the van life, this new system of vouchers for, like, when you're technically just the working poor, and even then, you could still be working. Think about that one for a second. You could be working and stay under a certain threshold. By the way, this is like the Walmart strategy where, hey, get these government benefits, this government benefits, and you're actually doing better than people that make more money than you. And that way Walmart doesn't have to pay you a realistic wage. Similar to the scam you see the illegals doing, except for the illegals don't even contribute anything. And this is why I look at some of these They're not van lifers, because people are like, well, what's the difference between a van lifer and some bum in an RV? A lot of van lifers actually like van life. They like off-grid living. They like the self-sufficiency. They enjoy the lifestyle. Of like being like you're in the middle of nowhere and the birds fly by and all that stuff. You want to know the difference between that and an RV bum? RV bums are generally people who couldn't afford the apartment they would rather be living in. If it was a choice between a free apartment and living in their RV in the waste, they would take the apartment to fucking tomorrow. But given the choice of a cash voucher, or for instance, maybe they work, but they're like, I'm just not going to piss away my money on a place to live because it's just a waste of money. Now that's kind of smart if you're working, because then you can store up your cash. But yeah, they're like, if they had, a lot of people given the choice would not be out in the wilds and the waste and whatnot. They would be in a normal situation. Those people are RV bums. And generally, one thing you'll notice about a lot of RV bums is some of them aren't really that savvy. You'll see them with a giant RV and they're still using a fucking generator. Like, you could have all the power and whatnot. And what happens is some of these people, like say they're on Social Security, or maybe getting the housing voucher and whatever other benefits they can get, or, they faked crazy or something to get into that voucher. These people, now that they're like, well, fuck, I just live in a Cousin Eddie RV. I now got like $1,000 to spend on whatever I want. So they go out and buy stupid shit. Drugs, alcohol, waste food. Like, it's funny, you'll see some of these people that are supposed to be broke, and yet they're bigger than me. Or, you can tell, you'll see some of them and they'll have like they'll have an older pickup, but they'll have the nicest rims on it. And you're like, yep, you know who paid for that? Not them. And I just got to wonder how many of the RV bums, I'm just saying, how many of the RV bums out there are actually just people that are getting like, vouchers from the system. They're getting, I don't know, $500, $700, $800, $1,000, $2,000, and then they get their food stamps. And it's cash instead of a voucher. So, is the government, and the government's not even paying attention. They're like, hey, as long as the person isn't causing trouble, a lot of states don't care. They don't care where you end up. If there was some accountability where they could actually show that you were renting a place. And by the way, this is another reason that as a landowner, you don't want to be a landlord a lot of the times, because when we're subsidizing some of the worst people in society to rent your place, do you think these people are, like, there is something to be said about if you have a renter who has a steady job and a steady income, they're less likely to be a fuck up. They really are. You know why? Because if they fuck up, they're going to lose their place to live. They can't afford a place to live. As were the Cousin Eddie mobile, the bums. The bums are literally getting money for doing nothing. Like, let me tell you, like, the ultimate, well, it's not the ultimate scam. I mean, honestly, that's men and women's relationships. Women are just bending men over on a regular basis, spiritually, metaphorically. It's funny to get them to bend over. Men bend over backwards throughout the course of their life. So the next one is religion. But it's a pretty upper tier scam. A person who's actually under the radar of what you can make, like, you stay in that threshold of poverty. So if you do make legal money, you're still in so-called poverty. So you still get all your benefits. And then if you want to take it a step further, you can literally go out and bum change, and how are they going to hold you accountable for that? And it's like I said, that I did a video ages ago, basically welfare gold, where you could be buying like precious metals and shit, or like, certain things that are valuable, things that are untraceable, and effectively you could be storing up a huge amount of wealth. Now, are most people going to do that? And also, you could even funnel your money through one of your relatives. Like, let's just say you got a mama-san that's, mama-san, papa-san, that are pretty all right. They're good people. So you use your exploited money to buy real estate through them. And then just in case so you don't technically own the real estate, and they own it. That way, the government, you keep on getting your government benefits. People wouldn't. Yes, people would. There are people that are smart enough to figure that patch out, that glitch in the system. Hell, I know people that have done that situation where the parents own the property just so if they get divorced, they don't lose shit. Like they have their entire holdings. Rich people do this. They have their entire holdings in the upper generation and in LLCs and protections. So if they get divorced or sued, they don't lose shit. You don't think poor people have figured out versions of this stuff? I'm just saying, sometimes I'm out there and I see some of these individuals. And the problem with a lot of them, especially when you give someone like, say, $800 to $1,000 a month or more, and they're living in an RV, and they are a meth head, like, I'm not kidding. Like, you got your casual drug, potheads are one thing, but some of these people, they're out there, and you go and some of them, they'll be stripping wire out in the middle of the wasteland. At least in the forest, eventually the moss and the leaves and the loam will cover it up. If something dies or is dropped in the wasteland, it'll be there forever. Like broken glass is a great example of that. Broken glass from 50 years ago is still broken glass today in the wasteland. As where in the rest of the world, it will be covered up by moss and other things. These people will come out here and they'll leave garbage. They'll leave a mess. They'll leave like old mattresses and sometimes dead pets and stuff. They're losers, they're drug addicts. They're not able to function in reality, and then you subsidize them. So whether it's them faking crazy and getting a check, or some sort of cash instead of a voucher for housing, I think it was one of the worst things you did, because a lot of people that wouldn't have been out in the middle of nowhere are now out there. And some of those people, if we're being honest about it, just like with the person who has to keep their job to pay their rent, they'll actually be maintaining better in society. I shit you not. They will maintain better in society if the fear of homelessness is around. If the fear of the cold or the uncomfortability, like that level of fear will make them be more rational about their lives. And you won't see the people being perpetual drug addicts. But what you also see with a lot of these Cousin Eddie type of people, what'll happen is if they're not in an RV, they'll have their girlfriend, has some kids, and they're the boyfriend, random Section 8. I have worked with dudes on construction sites that were complete fuck-ups, but they were good at swinging a hammer, when they weren't high. And the only reason they had a place to stay is because their girlfriend cranked out a kid. Now, I know that's offensive to a lot of people, but you start to think about it from this perspective. The death spiral that you see when you give people who have no bills, no accountability, free money, and they like doing drugs and getting drunk and fucking up shit. And a lot of these people, like I said, with the wire stripping, they'll do under-the-table work. Oh, they'll have some under-the-table gig going on. They're not completely inactive. It's just, I don't know, man. I gotta wonder how many problems, and some people say some of the people out here with the RVs, it's desperation. There's some people out here, like you'll see some van lifers, they're like a hybrid. They're not the true like wastelander, outlander like myself. They're people that were on, looking at Social Security, and some of them will sell their house and get an RV because they're like, they look at the cost of living in their hometowns and whatnot, and they're like, I can't afford that. They can't live off their Social Security. There's one old lady that was getting like $800 a month. And she was like, well, living in a house, I can't afford barely to pay my food, rent, let alone afford food. But in a van life situation, she was like, able to actually improve her life because her cost of living was so ridiculously low. So the same woman getting Social Security benefits and some food stamps and a few other benefits, free health care and all the other crap, she was able to actually save up some money and get her own little piece of property. Now, isn't that kind of crazy when you think about it for a second? And really, it comes back, I got to be real about it. A lot of the fault of the way Americans live is that we basically make money to piss away money. We make the money, we don't invest the money, we piss it away. That's what most Americans do. I don't do that. I think it's retarded. You make money, you invest the money, then the money makes you money, then you don't have to work. It's pretty much the infinite money glitch. Now people are like, what if the market goes down? The market goes up, the market goes down. You always store away some extra supplies, a little extra cash. You know, you set yourself up for multiple years, just like what the Mormons do, where the Mormons will have multiple years worth of food, at least the old school ones, because just in case there's a bad harvest or a bad situation, and that's what you do in life. But yeah, most of your cousin Eddie mobiles out there, these are people like, woo, living for today, man, yahoo! And they were the people back when the gold mining was happening or any sorts of resource industry. They were the boom and bust people. When things were booming, they were at the bar pissing it away. And when things go bust, they're like, what are we going to do? So they end up cooking meth or some shit. I'm just saying, there is a vast difference between van lifers and those people. And the worst thing that ever happened was giving these people free government money. Because now they're out here, they're fucking shit up. They're the reasons that a lot of places that I used to go to now have day use only signs. A lot of places I really loved are gone now. My habitat has slowly been destroyed, effectively, by government subsidization. And it's like that line from the rules of acquisition. You could afford your ship if the government wasn't trying to buy one for you. You could afford your house. Let's translate. You could afford your house if the government wasn't trying to buy one for you. Yeah. Freedom Phil, like, subscribe. Y'all take it easy. Peace.